Wir sind auf
Okay,
the
so go to the
Streamen.
channel because it's going to show up as a new video, probably. That's my hope.
Uh,
It's 2 seconds, 1 second. There we go. It should go up.
I am viewing the channel and I do not see. Oh, yes. It says live stream offline.
All right. Oh, nope. It says we're live on YouTube Studio now. It's a brand new video that it created of its own volition.
I do not see this video.
Me neither. Oh, now I do.
Yep. We are live. It had to create a brand new video.
Yep, we are live.
So, like I said, it won't seem to latch onto like any sort of pre-scheduled stream ever, but it will create new ones. So, I don't know what to do about like launching things on YouTube. I guess we can't announce anything to Twitter until we figure out how
They're
the hell.
live.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, like, I guess we can't announce anything to Twitter until we figure out how the heck to get OBS to cooperate. So, sorry about that, guys. Like, Calon,
We had Pagan Science Hour.
Calon, can you go link this stream to all the people that are waiting in the other one?
Yeah, I should be able to do this. Sorry if I've been speaking German a lot, so.
Hey, welcome, Wolf, by the way.
Was?
Wolf is in the Zoom now.
Oh yeah, I know. He's probably still at his job though.
So, I don't know if anybody else can see the chat. I don't know if it's actually going to be picking it up, because it's picking up the live chat from the other video, but it doesn't seem to be streaming to it. I don't know why. I don't know.
What's the point of having like umbrellas? Was like for the sun, yet they're not waterproof. This is really annoying.
I don't know either. Alright, so, hey guys, sorry for all the tech issues, again. We've been having trouble with OBS Streamlabs deciding to latch on to specific streams we schedule versus, like, trying to get it to latch on to the streams that we want. Right now, we're having a weird issue with the chat showing up from the old video rather than from the new one that just got created because I got fed up with the way that it was behaving. So, I can see your guys' chat. Unfortunately, it might not show up in the actual video. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what really to do about it, as far as the chat box. So, unfortunately, folks who want to answer viewer questions are going to have to, like, look at the live chat on the actual website. So
the thing to do is to sacrifice to Apollon.
Yeah. So, question. This video did create a new video, correct? Like, that's what you guys found on the channel?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Alright, so we're gonna have to, like, we're actually gonna have to have a meeting and try to get this set up so this doesn't happen again. Again, I'm so sorry to everybody who was waiting for us. I know a lot of you were waiting for quite a while. It is incredibly frustrating. Tech does not like me very much. But, now that we're all set up,
It's because you have Windows.
Thomas, I have Windows, which means that I can actually do things with my computer. Other than use budgeting software.
I'm just pulling your leg.
I know, but I have a serious problem with Macs. We can get into that debate later.
Okay.
So, coming back to the actual topic, now that we are done getting into fights with our freaking tech, welcome back to Poly-Ology. We have been over at Naka's channel, Calon and I, and Wolf and Witch are actually, moderators on his Discord. And over there, we've been having some problems with some, I guess I'll put it mildly, fundamentalists. And there's been some issues going on Twitter for that stuff as well. Basically, people coming in and talking to pagans and telling us that our beliefs are irrational or that they are delusional, which is itself a mental health type slur. Mm-hmm. So, I figured it would be nice to have a bunch of different pagans from a bunch of different backgrounds talk about our answers to some of the arguments and, problems that a lot of these folks like to present.
Now, are you referring to Christian fundamentalists or atheist fundamentalists or both?
Both.
To some degree, both. I was going to bring up the your gods are devils and you don't know it versus getting into the definition of what an idol is. I also wanted to bring up some of the materialist arguments that we have dealt with. Things like, well, you don't have any proof for your gods, and sort of we've talked a lot about the nature of reality and whether or not you can directly experience an objective reality. So the arguments about objective reality are something I wanted to get into. But
spoilers, you can't.
Because we've had several live streams now where Calon and I were in that live stream, and then somebody decided they wanted to talk epistemology, even though that had nothing to do with the topic at hand, I figure we are going to then have a big conversation for a video. We can link to some of those people, and for the pagan viewers in our chat, you'll have a little bit of ammunition yourself when somebody comes to bring these arguments to you. So what do you guys think?
Sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, because paganism and polytheism is not a monolith, so everybody who actually can introduce themselves, we probably should, and talk a little bit about your tradition, because we're all coming from different traditions, so some of our answers might be a little bit different. I'll start. I go by Aliakai, for all of you who don't already know me. I actually am a Hellenic Reconstructionist. And I, as far as where I'm coming from on a lot of this, I lean more towards Stoicism. There's a number of people who lean towards Platonism, and they'll have some different answers to some of these questions. But one of the other things that I wanted to go into was, well, what do polytheists think about X, Y, or Z? Which Ocean did a fantastic video on how polytheism's not a monolith. And he talked a lot about heathenry, but I think it'd be interesting to have some of us answer at least a few of those types of questions as well from our own traditions. Thomas, you're to my left. Go ahead and give yourself an introduction.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I classify myself as a Hellenist, similar to Aliakai. I am very much a Platonist in the sense of late Platonism, or what people generally refer to as Neoplatonism. And to me, I found that sort of metaphysical argumentation, or I'd say that the most sort of convincing metaphysical argumentation that I've encountered in my reading that has done the most to make me think of the divine as an actual as actually evident would be Aristotle's argument for the prime mover, and I found that to be rather enlightening, and I sort of attribute the gods as each being their own prime movers to whatever spheres of influence, I guess you would call them, as an actual, as well as being sort of Hanatic manifolds in the eyes of Proclus. So that's where I am at.
Okay. So Calon, do you want to give yourself an introduction?
I've been summoned? Okay. I am right now currently enjoying the blessings of Thor, so sorry if you hear the rain. I am a Reconstructionist heathen and a Reconstructionist Sumerian, although tonight I will be speaking from mostly the heathen perspective, because that's usually the perspective I give online. And yeah, so is there anything else I should say?
I guess just talk a little bit about your experiences with Christian fundamentalists and atheist fundamentalists.
Oh, I was just fighting a Christian fundamentalist, actually. That was fun. Apparently he thinks his God is the grounding of all logic and whatnot, which really doesn't make any sense given that Yahweh decided to screw with his people and keep them in a desert for like what was it, 30 years or something like that.
Divine Command Theory is fun, man.
Oh, it's great. It's fun to destroy.
Alright, so Witch, how about you give us an introduction of you and your tradition and your viewpoints. And again, I apologize, guys, that the chat that's coming up on the screen is not the one that's going on the right-hand side. We're working on it.
Hi, I'm Witch. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for the background noise. My kids are awake right now. I normally do streams and stuff later at night when they're asleep. I'm a witch. I have identified most recently as an atheist. My path has taken a turn recently. I'm now studying Celtic polytheism and likely moving in that direction. I don't know. I kind of refer to my craft as down and dirty. I do what I need to do when I need to do it. Not really sure what else to say about it. I'm kind of new to putting my beliefs and stuff into words for others to consume.
Okay. So I just tried to reset the chat box. I am hoping that it will show up now. I have no idea if it's going to, but it went from showing the other chat to not showing anything, so I'm gonna keep working on it. Alright, Wolf, I guess you're on Discord. Shoot me a DM if you can't talk right now. But if you'd like to introduce yourself, if you've got a minute, then I'd love to have that happen. If not... Oh, hey, it looks like... Hey, we've got the chat! It's working. Sweet.
Yay.
So we now have a chat box.
Yes.
Almost.
There.
Well, it's not showing up on the live yet, but it is showing up on my screen, which means it will show up on the live after the delay. So
Them, chat.
I win. I have defeated the technology gremlins. All right. So,
for now.
The first one that I wanted to address is the one that's been getting slung at us kind of a lot lately, and that is
Aliakai, you're delusional.
Yeah, basically.
You're delusional.
So
don't ask why. No, you're delusional. Yes, totally.
Yep, that's the one. So, first off, when it comes to things like delusions, there's actually a very specific clinical definition for the term delusion. And I'd like to address that because a lot of people try to claim a colloquial definition, but even the colloquial definition, if you really want to get into semantics, is a persistent, erroneous belief that one continues to hold on to despite evidence to the contrary. And the problem with calling a theist delusional is that lack of evidence in favor of is not evidence against. So does anybody want to expand on that?
Yeah, basically, the way you tend to falsify theological arguments is via coherency, not necessarily empirically. So basically, what religion deals with is not the quantitative, it is the qualitative, the lived experience of people. So to say that it is delusional is to assert that there is some sort of one ultimate objective reality that does not include, and this is taking it at its colloquial, that there is some sort of objective reality that precludes God's.
Well, I mean,
which is simply not provable.
Well, and even the dictionary definition, which, if you were to Google define delusion, is an idiosyncratic belief or impression that is firmly maintained despite being contradicted by what is generally accepted as reality or rational argument, typically a symptom of a mental disorder.
Yeah, and if you go by that delusion, that makes atheism a delusion.
Well, yeah, considering commonly what's accepted as monotheism. But also, it says typically a symptom of a mental disorder, meaning even the dictionary definition, which is often cited by these folks, specifically goes out of its way to state that delusion is generally considered to be a medical term.
Mm-hmm. Basically, what it boils down to is that these atheists can't conceptualize how another worldview, aside from their own, can be coherent, and because they can't conceptualize that, they decide that that makes us delusional,
Well,
rather than humbly saying that, okay, we can't show this.
Well, and ultimately, this, how can I begin to explain this? This kind of goes into the next stage of these arguments, because it starts off with some sort of broad statement often. Your beliefs are delusional. And if you're talking about arguing with the term delusional, like your beliefs are symptoms of mental illness, you're effectively calling religion a mental illness, which is both insulting ableist-wise to folks with a mental illness, but also insulting to the vast majority of the population on Earth, because
And
whether
it's
we
not
like
only
it or
doing
not,
that.
most people are monotheists, so most people are theists.
Well, no, wait, hold up. It's not just insulting. It's also plain wrong.
Correct.
Because there are plenty of religions that are either transtheist, that means they move beyond theism and atheism. That's complicated. And there are also atheistic philosophies, because religion as itself tends to be a way of life.
Correct.
A way to sort of determine values and various things of that nature. In fact, atheists don't realize it, but these atheists in particular don't realize it. But a lot of their values and whatnot are directly Christian.
Well, I mean, we can talk about atheism and latent Christianity in a moment, but the next...
I mean, we're talking about it right now, actually. This is the term, using the term delusion. It's just what Christians use against us.
Frequently, yeah. I mean, like, and this comes to sort of the fundamentalist Christian version of this. So, where atheists will say we're delusional because they claim there's evidence against the existence of deity. And again, the best response I would say on my end that I use is lack of empirical evidence for is not the same as evidence against. And just because your standard is that you require empirical evidence for in order to hold a belief, empirical evidence meaning things like scientific evidence, studies, etc., does not necessarily mean that something like, say, personal experience with deity cannot be convincing to the person who had the personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's where the problem tends to start for atheists, is atheists will then reply, more often than not, your personal experience does not convince me. And here's
That's fine.
And here's where Calon and I will usually laugh, and we'll go, okay, so why are you challenging my belief if I'm not trying to convince you of it? I'm simply convincing you that I'm not delusional. Because delusional or irrational, and irrational is the other words here. Now, Ocean loves this particular word, irrational, because it means
I do too.
It means that a belief or a thought is not grounded in logical consistency. Right?
Yeah.
But here's the problem.
As a logician, I love the word irrational because it's just. I actually ran into a fundamentalist atheist. He was like, "Well, you're being irrational." I was like, "Really? What do you mean?" It was like, "Well, you're not using logic." I posted up a formal argument in symbolic logic and said, "Okay, have a shot. Tell me which rules of deduction am I using here?"
So here's
the atheist couldn't do it.
Well, and here's one particular strain of logical thought that can be very useful in this regard. And Calon, if you want to play with objective reality for a minute, like play back and forth.
I love objective reality. It's something that you can't sense.
Basically, do you want to do a quick dialectic?
Which side am I? The antithesis or the thesis?
So in the case of the thesis being there is an objective reality, play thesis.
There's an objective reality.
Okay, prove it.
Okay, if I take your head and slam it against the wall, your head will splash.
Okay, well, how do you know that that's what actually happened?
Because I see it.
Okay, so what do you think sight is?
It's the reception of light from your squashed head, like to the eyeballs into your brain. Yeah.
Okay, well, like, are you directly, like, are your eyeballs in direct contact with that light? Like, do your eyeballs directly communicate that somehow, or is there a transferring pathway here?
The former.
That's not really how eyeballs work. I mean, like, your eyes receive photons, that's true, but when the photons hit the back of your eyes themselves, like, they don't actually have that information. What happens is a series of electrical signals and hormones get sent to your brain, and your brain interprets those signals, right?
I'm going to just butt in and say cogito ergo sum.
Well,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's what we're getting to, Thomas.
But
Yes.
so, like, if that's the case, then that means you're not actually directly experiencing that light, are you? There's actually kind of two steps in between.
But am I not my hormones?
Well, do you consider yourself to be your brain?
Yeah. So my hormones are part of my brain, so they're part of myself.
Well, are you aware of the fact that what you consider you, the narrator, the thing that thinks your thoughts, is only one particular part of your brain?
Ooh.
Huh, really?
Did you know, actually, that there's some research that shows that when you move your hands, that the parts of your brain that fire to move your hands fire before the part of your brain that realizes that your hands are going to move and justifies it? That we'll call it your internal narrator for the the lack of a better word.
Mr. Dick.
Did you know that those parts for movement actually fire before the parts of your brain that, your internal narrator comprises move?
Actually, yes, I did. But for the sake of argument, we'll say I didn't.
Yeah, well, you're playing thesis at the moment. So if that's the case, then that means that your internal narrator is actually justifying that movement after the fact. That there are parts of your brain that you are not in conscious control of, correct?
But then what? But I decided to move my hand instantly before my brain did it. So that means my hands must have brain or something. I don't know. Huh.
But coming back to your eyes, your brain is not your eyes. There's a pathway and things that go through. And, like, do you think you can see... Like, do you think that you can see every single spectrum of light there are? Like, do all photons enter your eyes, and can your brain interpret all of them?
No.
Okay, so...
No choice to say that.
So you agree, then, that there's ultraviolet and infrared light that you cannot experience?
Yeah.
So,
well, no, I can't experience them. I just have to map them into visible light spectrum.
Okay, but your eyes directly, you're saying that personal experience, right? You're saying you can directly confer an objective reality through personal experience. If you cannot see a large swath of just the objective part of,
but I can see it through
light part of objective reality, then how can you say that you can actually experience objective reality?
Because there has to be a sense, there has to be something hitting those eyes in order for the eyes to, for the mechanism to trigger.
So the main issue here is that you would end up using something in objective reality to prove objective reality.
Well, no, the problem is that you're having to use your subjective senses, things that are limited, and have to
My
transfer...
senses are objective.
Of course, Calon. Of course.
You're having to use subjective senses.
Look, the world is my representation.
Okay, so here...
Can I...
Go on, Witch.
Real quick? Okay. If Calon's gonna say that senses are objective, then I would just say ask 5 women who have given childbirth without meds how painful it was, and see if you get an across-the-board response.
There's a good example. And actually, Calon, if you're saying senses are objective, all right, so my partner has color deficiency. He can't see on the blue spectrum. Does the sky look the same to him that it does to you?
Sorry, you cut out there? Say again?
I said, so you're saying your senses are objective. My question is, okay, my partner has color deficiency. He actually cannot see things properly on the blue spectrum. Does the sky look the same to him that it does to you?
Yes.
It can't, because the photoreceptors in his eyes are different than the ones in yours, which means that you each experience reality physically differently through your senses.
But we still see this entity called the sky.
But if you do not see the sky the same, then how can your
so
senses
that shows
be objective?
that color is subjective, but not that the fact that there's a representation that we call a sky is subjective.
Okay, so if you were to bash my head against the wall, I would probably feel pain before I got knocked out, right? There's
Possibly,
a condition.
Yes.
There is a condition
Pain
that causes
symbol,
problems, yes, where somebody can no longer feel pain. If they got their head bashed against the wall, they wouldn't feel that pain. Are their senses objective?
I mean, we're assuming a purpose to pain, though.
I'm not assuming a purpose. I'm asking if they cannot feel pain, but the exact same action would cause you pain, then how can you call
because they would still have the
senses
experience of being slammed against the wall.
And if that person was, say, blind and deaf and also could not feel pain, would they have the experience of being slammed against the wall?
Oh, that would be awful. Presumably, they would still feel getting slammed against the wall.
Well, the same receptors that feel pain actually are responsible for touch, so they might not.
Okay, all of you are just... none of you actually really exist. Yeah, that's how I'll say it. That's fine.
The problem is that it's impossible to use limited subjective senses to perceive objective reality. If there is an objective reality, it is one that none of us will ever experience.
Mm-hmm.
So there's premise one.
In fact, insects like birds, actually, they can see ultraviolet light, and that's why that's
birds
how they can
aren't
actually...
insects.
I said birds and insects.
Oh,
you said but it's okay, Calon. We all make mistakes.
Sorry about that. I just had to.
Anyhow, birds.
I just had to clarify that.
Okay, yeah.
Thomas, you just gave me an in to make fun of the forums. You realize this, right? It flies, so it must be in the form of a bird. Anyway, sorry, that's an inside pagan joke.
Anyhow, birds can actually use ultraviolet. I think it's ultraviolet light. They can see it, and they can use that to tell different sexes apart for mating.
Mm-hmm. Actually, also, bees and such, because they can see ultraviolet, there are basically landing strips on flowers that we cannot see. And we didn't even bring up hearing, but rats and cats actually communicate with amongst each other in frequencies that we cannot hear. The little bits of squeaks that we do hear are nothing compared to the full vocal range that rats actually employ to communicate with one another.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, there's no object. Oh, and that's not even going into, like, for example, with how the anteater views the ant phenomenologically or experiential-wise. The anteater doesn't actually recognize individual ants. It only sees a mass of ants. So there's that fun part.
So we can't definitively say that there is an objective reality because we can't definitively experience one.
In fact, more than likely there isn't.
Oh. I was going to say that's why people like Descartes tried to think about objective reality through the lens of just logic, without any bearing on our senses, which may deceive us.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly the same argument that Descartes was making in
meditations.
Meditations. Yeah, I forgot which thing of Descartes it was.
That's basically premise one or part one is, when somebody says that there is an objective reality, my answer of prove it, it's a lot more difficult than you might initially think. So number two, we then go to personal experience of deity. There's a number of arguments around this, right? So often atheists will argue that a personal experience with deity can be explained by mental illness or hallucination or anything else. But given the subjectivity that we just established and agreed to of our senses, there's no way we can actually know that any individual thing we are experiencing is actually a part of what one would call objective reality, even if we agree that there somehow is one. right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that's the case, we then have to come up to the idea of defining the gods. And this is where each of us might have a different sort of position on this. Thomas, how would you define the gods?
Um, from a very strict, from a very strict, for a very strict definition, I would say that the highest beings which are directly um, which are directly participating in the one.
Okay, we have to get way too deep into Platonism for this.
Okay, I said the most strict the most strict
The strictest
definition.
definition that I could come up with would be a disembodied mind that has the ability potentially to affect reality through the laws of physics. Would you say that that's a fair definition?
I mean, sure.
Sounds
That-
good.
Would Calon, do you think that that fits the way the gods are portrayed in heathenry?
Yeah.
What about you, Witch?
That's from Delion. So, yeah.
What about you, Witch?
I'm still learning all the terminology that y'all are just like throwing around secondhand. So
Sorry about that.
trying to put it in my own words, I view them as something more powerful than humans, with agency, and they choose to interact or not interact depending upon whether they want to or not. I kind of define it loosely.
Do you believe they have a physical body?
I'm loosely defining it that way because personally for me, I'm still holding out a conclusion on whether the Earth has agency or not because of the Gaia hypothesis kind of being in a stalemate as far as testing. If that makes any sense.
That makes sense, yeah. No, for those who don't... I
was just about to say that I don't believe the gods have physical bodies for the... and if you want to look into the details of that, look into a specific argument in Cicero's On the Nature of the Gods, where he criticizes the Epicureans for claiming that gods are possessed of atoms. So,
yeah. Also, I just want to explain the Gaia hypothesis is the idea that the world itself is alive, that like rivers are like blood, and like the biosphere overall itself, it has some form of consciousness because, well, basically it would be an emergent property from everything. So,
as far as I don't think they have a physical form that is similar to humans. I think that our tendency to anthropomorphize concepts to understand them is why they're generally depicted in some type of human form.
Yeah,
I don't think... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's something what the early Greek philosopher Heraclitus, I think it was Heraclitus, who said that if for instance horses believed in the deities, then they would be
then they'd call Poseidon daddy.
Horse-shaped. Sorry, what?
I said if horses believed in deities, then they'd call Poseidon daddy.
Yeah, I won't say, I can't go as far as to say that they don't have physical form, because then that rules out the possibility of the Earth being a deity with agency and things like that. But I don't think they look like us.
Okay, yeah.
So, do you mind if I step in?
Sure, go ahead, Wolf.
Wolfer, hi.
Hey,
Hey,
welcome
Wolf.
Wolf to the stream. Wolf, if you want to introduce yourself since you weren't available when things started.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little busy earlier, but I wanted to join in here and say a few things. I'm Wolfred Strongbeard, or Wolf the Red, if you see me in mod chats or on Discord. I'm a Norse polytheist. I subscribe specifically and singularly to the Norse pantheon of gods like Odin, Thor, Freya, Frigg. And I've been a practicing polytheist.
Loki.
No. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that one day. But I've been a pagan and practicing polytheist for I don't know, probably about 9-ish years, maybe a little bit less than that. But I've got a pretty fun story I can tell one day. But specifically referring to whether or not the gods can have a physical body.
Okay, so we're not talking about whether they can, it's whether or not they generally do. Like whether or not they always do.
Always would be I would say hard no, because I don't think the gods are always anything. I think that they have the power to be whatever it is they need to be within the limit of their power, whichever god we're referring to at the time.
So would you agree that disembodied would be an accurate description of if there is a natural state to a god, like disembodied would be?
I would say that would be bare minimum. To give a deity a label, you would have to start with disembodied mind at least.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a good generalization that would go across all pantheons. I specifically hold to the concept of every god is possibly a god. Like all of them exist. I'm not limiting to. I'm not going to any one god and say this one does not exist, but the other 9,000 do.
Well, this is where I will frequently say, like if a Christian friend of mine starts talking about praying, I'll be like, oh, well, your God answered your prayer, because to me, that's not an affront, right? Like, Yahweh probably exists, but he's also probably a dick, or at the very least, his followers have made him out to be one.
From what I've heard from
I believe that Yahweh... I believe that Yahweh exists. I just believe that he can't exist in the way that Christians claim that he does. I don't believe. Fair. Yeah, I don't believe that he exists like they think he does. And if he does exist and has done some of the things that they think that he does, then he can't be some of the things that they claim, like all good or all powerful.
So we were working with the argument about basically senses. Calon, your mic. Your mic.
What about it?
It sounded like you were tapping on it again.
No, I wasn't.
So we were talking about the idea that given that we cannot experience objective reality directly, I was expanding on that idea to state that effectively, if gods are disembodied minds that have the ability to potentially manipulate matter through the laws of physics, then one would assume that those brain firings that people frequently talk about are potential hallucinations. They're identical to the brain firings that go off when our senses, quote, actually perceive something, and I'm using this term very loosely. So if a god wanted to appear to you, they would be able to do so by activating that segment of your brain, and you would not be able to tell the difference between that and the god actually creating a physical form in front of you. Am I wrong?
No, I would agree with that.
That kind of taps into something that I was hoping we might bring up, which was specifically referring to atheists here asserting that science conclusively proves there's no God, but all the science ever concludes is, this is the natural thing that we have found. It never makes a claim that there is no way that this part of your brain can't be triggered through a way that can't be tested.
I've often seen people try to bring up things like the theory of evolution by natural selection as an example of how science proves there is no God, but it's...
What that's an example of, by the way, is what's referred to as abductive logic. what they're basically trying to argue is that the concept of gods has no explanatory power, therefore they don't exist, which is wrong. That's not how you do abduction. The way you would do it is that you would have to conclude they probably don't exist, because abduction only leads to probability, not to hard, cold fact.
And it kind of brings up two problems, because when they make the assertion that science has proven there are no gods, then one, they're disregarding the immaterial claim of deities.
Disembodied minds.
Yes. And then the second thing is they usually follow it up with, there's this mountain of evidence that has never once, over however many years, proven a God exists, which immediately disregards the progression of technology and the possibility that at some point in the future, we may develop a technology that can detect it. That's maybe a little sci-fi, but they're disregarding future discovery.
Okay, Thomas,
And they're
if you want to
saying
get into
because
Platonism, you're going to need to do, like, a video on it at some point, because Platonism is way too complicated to cover on a stream like this.
I know, I just wanted to just write that down
And also,
for
it will
people.
probably be a debate between the two of us, because, like, Aristotle destroyed the idea of the forms, and without forms, Platonism falls apart.
You're wrong. He just dismantled
No
what Plato
Platonist debate now.
himself thought of
Did
the
I
form.
just say a thing and I don't know the thing that I said?
No, it wasn't you that said anything. Thomas said something in the chat, and I told him, like, that he needs to write scripts on this if he wants to talk about it, because it's too complicated for this stream.
Okay. I'm very confused. But yeah, that's the other thing that frustrates me, is they disregard the advancement that could possibly be made in the future.
The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Right.
Yeah.
So
It's like if saying that no. It's like if saying no one has found grass that's colored red. That doesn't mean that nowhere in the universe is there grass colored red.
Hello, Mark. Welcome. So, Wolf, are you interested in expanding on this at all, or would you like us to move forward a little bit with the rest of this argument?
Sorry, I was getting into a car. Say again?
I think Wolf got, oh, wait, nope, he unmuted. Calon, mute your mic, please.
I really don't have anything else to add to that, to be honest.
So, the point being is that I can then agree, if you and I have a discussion on this and you've made these claims, I can agree that my personal experience that I have had with a deity is not grounds for you to believe in my deity. But you cannot argue that it is not logical for me to believe it is.
Nope.
And that's where the problem is. You may have a different standard of evidence for your belief, but my argument is not that you should believe in my God. My argument is that I have a logical, rational, philosophically grounded reason to do so because of my personal experience.
And I think that's something, it's kind of another mistake they make when they're approaching a pagan or a polytheist, is we begin the discussion acknowledging the fact we can't prove our deities exist. We can't. We're not trying to. We have personal experience that confirms it to us personally. But we acknowledge we can't prove it to you and have no interest in doing so in a way that would convince you to now hold our beliefs.
Correct. And that's where, specifically on the atheist side of fundamentalism, that's where you tend to run into arguments. Because, as I said towards the beginning of the stream, a lot of the time we will be discussing something completely unrelated. Like, I'll bring up an example of the stream that Calon and I did a while back. Or, I don't know, Calon, were you a part of this one? Talking about the way the church shuts down... Yes, you were. It was the way the church shuts down independent thought. We did a companion stream here on Poly-Ology about it, too. And what happened was, while we were talking about specifically how the church shuts down independent thought, a bunch of atheist fundamentalists, and I'm going to use this term and we'll define it in a bit if you guys want us to, came into the chat and started...
Atheofundies.
Yes, Atheofundies came into the chat and started trying to demand that we prove our gods exist to them, even though we weren't discussing that topic. It was like, let's turn this into an epistemological fight with the pagans. And this sometimes happened. This happened to the Christian too. A couple of the atheists in the live stream ended up going after him for his beliefs, but that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about the way the church as an institution stops individual believers from having free thought. And everybody in that stream agreed that this is a thing that happens. So it's very strange that frequently fundamentalists, like Christians, I can see how they would have a horse in the race. Because a fundamental core of the Christian ideology is, if you don't convert and accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior and get baptized and whatever other, tenet you have to do, get forgiveness, etc., and you don't follow those tenets, then you're going to go to a place of burning for eternity for being human, effectively. And so, like, getting people to agree with you is core to that. But atheism... there is no stake for you, whether I believe in gods or not. If I'm sitting here telling you my beliefs are logically grounded, and I give you all of those logical groundings, and I'm not trying to convince you to believe in them yourself, nor am I attempting to legislate based off of those beliefs, then why do you feel the need to challenge them when we're not having a discussion about them? Where does that come from?
Generally,
what horse do you have in this race?
Generally, from when I brought this up to them, they'll say, well, one irrational thought leads to another irrational thought automatically.
Apparently there are now two wolves.
They go right into slippery slope arguments from there.
Which is a fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a logical fallacy.
Yes, like the argument. So here comes the next argument that we often hear. Hey, Exacta Guru. So the next argument that we hear is that God belief automatically leads to other irrational beliefs. And I'd love to let somebody else take a crack at this one, because I know a couple of you have a personal beef with this particular argument. I know that Calon in particular gets it a lot on Twitter. So if one of you wants to take a crack at this, then go ahead. I'll acknowledge that we have a problem with woo in the pagan community, but there's a problem with woo in the atheist community too. Woo is everywhere.
With the argument of one irrational belief leads to more. Sorry about the background noise. My husband, who is an atheist, and I have had this conversation several times. He's XJW, for context there.
And to contextualize this argument, like, you're also assuming God belief is irrational, which we just debunked. So let's break that down. We'll just say God belief leads to irrational beliefs.
Right. What the conversation has boiled down to is him viewing religion as dangerous, not the view of how religion is used is dangerous. 1 second.
Does somebody else want to expand on that while Witch gets her house in order?
Okay.
Okay, Witch is back.
So it's that, and it ended up the conclusion of the conversations has been a phobia of religion, an actual fear of religion because of the type of religion he was in. So that makes me wonder how prevalent the actual fear is within the community.
Wolf, Calon, do you guys want to expand on that at all?
Well, I think there is a little bit. I mean, I can understand the fear part, especially if you've grown up in a very fundamentalist religious household that are things like very homophobic or transphobic or even racist or just anything. I can understand that, but of course, not every religion is like that. Not every temple is like that. it's sort of a not all religions are like that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, even polytheism isn't a monolith. I mean, hell, even Hellenism isn't a monolith. You and I disagree on a lot of things.
Yep.
I mean, the Stoics believe that the gods are immanent, and the
Well, that's a
Platonists
monolith.
effectively
What are you talking
don't.
about?
Oh wait,
What are you talking
and
about? What are you talking about? You all are barbarians.
No, you're the barbarian. You're not speaking Greek right now.
all of us are barbarians.
At the
No,
moment, we are.
No, you two are the
Barbaroi
barbarians.
logoi.
Well, I am not when I'm in my temple, so meh.
Sorry,
I mean, it's just
kinda-
uncivilized. It's savage. You guys are just barbarians. You need to do it the proper Germanic way.
to
Anyway.
kind of clarify my comment because I got a little distracted by the kids. When we're talking about the segment of the atheist community that we tend to have issues with,
The fundamentalist segment.
right, it makes me wonder how many of them came out of Jehovah's Witness or Mormonism or those types of very stringent religions.
Well, a number of the Christian sects, I mean, even evangelicals can get fairly extreme. Like, even non-denominational evangelicals can get fairly extreme. I mean, heck, Catholicism isn't universally incredibly strict. Oh, we lost Wolf.
You have trad caps. You see them on Twitter all the time.
Well, what I'm saying is not all of Catholicism as a monolith is.
Fine, I'll grant that. I don't want to, okay? But yeah, fine.
So, we have Wolf coming back. Wolf, are you back? Okay, Calon, can you mute? Like, whatever weird background noise is coming through is loud. Wolf, have you returned? Looks like Wolf might be having some technical issues.
Okay. I would just like to say that to answer Witch's question, I know for instance, Triatiel in the chat came from Mormonism, and a lot of other people have. I know our other co-host Via, she came out of a rather evangelical Lutheran household, and yeah, I can't really think of any other denominations off the top of my head.
Well, yeah, and I came
you
out
have
of
extreme
hardcore
Baptists and
evangelicalism as well. Like, my particular evangelical church was not a, quote, denomination. It was its own thing, but I did come out of that also.
Oh, I wasn't trying to imply that everybody that comes out of those sects of Christianity are fundamental atheists.
No,
I'm
not
sorry
at
if that's
all.
how I came across. I'm curious of the correlation between fundamental atheists and what they deconverted from.
Well, I don't even think it necessarily has to be a
In my-
hardcore sect for somebody to still carry a certain amount of latent Christianity. Because Christianity declares there is only one way to believe, and puts a hierarchy, as we've talked about before on our video on, like, the way that the Christian God, the way that the Bible distances Christians from their God. There's a declaration in Christianity that there's only one way to believe, and believers get into heaven and everybody else burns. And that creates an implicit hierarchy no matter how much you try to weave your way around it. Which comes to the Christian fundamentalist argument segment. So, when you ask a Christian what they think our gods are, you generally get one of 3 or 4 different answers, right? Which one do y'all want to talk about first? Because I'm pretty sure all of you know what they are.
We're demon worshippers.
Demons.
Hey, Wolf is back.
I mean, you all are demon worshippers. I'm not. I'm a perfect Christian.
So, what do you guys what do you guys think of that? I mean, I think it's kind of insulting also. Like, again, not even because there's this assumption that I have no idea what I'm interacting with and that I'm too dumb to know.
I just think that it's stupid because it assumes that the person who's outside the whatever religion, either pagan or Hindu or Sikh or anything or anyone else, knows more about the religion than the people who practice it. It shows extreme ignorance, arrogance as well.
Wolf, do you have any comment on that?
I mean, I pretty much agree with all of that. Anytime I try to explain, what our deities is, it's always relabeling. You're always going to get relabeling, especially when you're speaking to a Christian. They can't admit that there is possibly other gods. I actually had a conversation with a Christian a couple weeks ago. I live in the Bible Belt, and I work in an extremely Christian town, and the work that I work in, almost everybody's a Christian. I'm very hard pressed to find somebody who's not even, just an atheist, and I have the thing. I'm pretty sure I'm the only pagan.
But, Ocean, the atheist, right?
Yeah. Well, Ocean's a closet Christian, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and he came up to me and he started talking to me. He knows I'm a pagan. There's a very few select people I trust letting them know. And they started telling me the story of the fallen angels and how the angels were able to use some of their power still even after they came to Earth. And that's probably where gods like Zeus and Thor and Odin, and he labeled a few other ones, but he's like, that's probably what humanity thought it was they were worshiping so long ago, were these fallen angels who were trying to lie to humanity because they were mad at God for kicking them out of heaven. And it was a very long conversation we had, and I just nodded my head and smiled like I usually do.
Yeah, and so, there's, again, this relabeling assumption that there can't possibly be other gods, even though, in the Ten Commandments, it is phrased, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Not automatically that they're not real. In fact, the book itself, Ocean did a fantastic video on Kamosh, but there's other places throughout the Bible where the existence of other gods are acknowledged. So, the Bible itself doesn't say there ain't any other gods. It just says that Yahweh is the best, which is, well, at the very least typical of monotheistic traditions, right? The very first monotheistic tradition that we can see recorded in history was Akhenaten's attempt... Yep, and, he tried to deface the temples and destroy all access to the other gods, and he got strung and hung for it.
As he should.
And that's how we got our youngest king ever in Egypt, Tutankhamun.
Who became famous because some British dude found him.
And his tomb was so small that nobody was able to get far enough into it to steal everything. So it was one of the most complete tombs we've ever exhumed.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get response 2 from Christians. Either you're a devil worshiper or you're worshipping an idol. Which, define idol? That's usually my response to Christians who say that, because I don't know what you mean.
Usually they'll say something like money, or they'll say Aphrodite for love.
They seem to operate on this idea that pagans and polytheists believe that our deities actually reside entirely within the statues on our altars.
Or in the temples.
Is generally the argument that gets made to me, which I my response is normally, do you think Jesus lives in your necklace? That's kind of the same argument there.
Well, I mean, like, at that point, every image of Jesus, if you believe that the Trinity can somehow possibly be coherent, every image of Jesus is therefore an idol.
Right.
Because, like, Jesus
Well, I mean,
is
if you're
supposed
a
to be
Protestant.
God. Jesus is supposed to be God. They're supposed to be one and the same. So is the Holy Spirit, all at the same time, despite him also being the Son. The point being is that every image of Jesus is also an image of God, and if you ever pray, like, facing or looking at an image of Jesus, or you pray to God through Jesus, you are praying to an idol. Because that image is an image of God, which is forbidden in the Bible. Am I wrong here?
No, it's an image of God.
That was my understanding.
Same here.
Wolf?
Still having technical issues?
So, now we come to... Yes, Voltron Yave. Exacto is apparently also a fan of Ocean. Ocean's video on the Trinity is amazing. And it kind of breaks down all the common arguments about it. The Trinity is completely incoherent, and it's also not actually in the Bible. So, coming back to the arguments, argument number 3 is that we're actually atheists. Because the gods are just flat out not real.
Which is really weird, as Christians are the actual atheists.
Yeah.
Christians are one God away from being atheists.
No, they are atheists.
Well, I mean, yeah, they are atheists.
Yeah, no, they just directly are.
Yeah.
Alright, defend your position, Calon.
You're delusional. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, so all the gods exist except for that one. That's Calon's position, apparently.
No, all right. Here's the argument. The argument is the Christians believe in monotheistic God, which means they have to immediately deny every other god, which means they deny all of our gods, and because their God is incoherent, that God cannot exist, so therefore they are atheists.
Okay, then. Also, Wolf, your camera is on.
Wait, hi. There is that beard.
That is the beardest of beards. It is not an omnipotent beard, I think. Not yet. That is Ocean.
No, but it's stronger.
It is stronger. It's not omnipotent, but it is stronger.
People are so not going to get that.
So,
they call me Strongbeard for a reason. Have you ever seen Ocean's beard? It's not that strong. My beard is significantly stronger.
Your beard clearly knows how to lift.
My beard is actually fireproof, and I've got proof that it is fireproof. A couple years ago, I pulled a kid out of a burning car, and my beard did not get singed, even though my face was in the flames.
Damn.
All right, so
it's fire. So yes, Christians are atheists. You heard it here.
Okay, but you didn't actually defend your Christians are atheists.
Yes, I did. What? Hello?
We can hear you.
Yes, you're here, Calon.
Yeah, I did.
Yes, Calon, we can hear you not defending your position.
No. Basically, if all Christians deny our God while holding an incoherent God, which they can't possibly believe in, so therefore they are atheists. That's my position.
Seems coherent.
Well, I mean, like, if believing in the Trinity specifically is required to be a Christian, then all Christians are atheists.
Well,
yeah, that's more of what I mean, yeah.
I mean, just because their book, just because the book presents a description in an incoherent manner.
Oh, the book didn't even present that description. That's Christian theology.
That it doesn't necessarily mean the deity doesn't exist. It just means they have a crap description of.
Oh, the deity exists, and they worship that deity. I can grant them that, but they're still atheists because they hold an incoherent concept.
They definitely worship a deity but I don't. Here's my problem with how they worship their deity. They call it God, and God is a title, not a name. His name is Yahweh. That's the original Hebrew. So
Yahweh.
why they don't label him and call him by name when they just send prayers out to the void and say God? There's no telling which God is picking up their prayers.
That yeah.
Well, I mean, if
For
you
them,
if
They
it's
you
could
only
were
very
one God.
easily they could very easily be praying to and receiving help from a deity
issue.
from any pantheon.
Raven.
Yeah.
Raven is answering all of your prayers. Well, I mean, I think that some of that, at least in part, is mitigated by the fact that Yahweh is said to have a son, and if you cast the Trinity aside and you accept the idea that Christians may potentially be at least partially polytheistic, like let's call him, for since I'm a Hellenist, let's call Jesus a demigod, right? He's a
A
god.
demiurge.
Yeah, or no, a demigod, like a hero, effectively, because
Or a
in the Greek,
daimon?
he's not a daimon because he has a physical body.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So like he's a child of a god and a human, right? Like they say that effectively through an angel, Yahweh artificially inseminated Mary, and that's how Jesus came about. And so if we are to accept that Yahweh did this through the angel or whatever, then what you end up having here is effectively a half-human or a hero through Greek mythology.
So he would basically be along the same lines as Heracles.
Effectively. And so if we're going to grant that, then like the protection, the buffer against those prayers being sent out into the void is that Christians generally tack on, "In Jesus' name I pray," because the Bible says nobody reaches the Father but through me. So you're effectively asking a hero to deliver your prayers to your God. Does that make sense, Wolf?
Oh yeah.
I think that's the closest to like not inadvertently praying to whatever God you damn well please. Or whoever feels like answering.
From what I've heard of descriptions of Yahweh from other polytheists, they tend to say that he's actually quite reserved and wants obedience.
Yeah, I mean, like, as far as we can tell, he was a war deity.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about this to make an expert judgment on this.
Honestly, Jesus was a pretty big war guy as well. They always talk
I
about
come not to bring peace but a sword.
Yeah, they always talk about how Jesus is love and peace and acceptance.
The Prince of Peace.
There was one story where Jesus appeared in radiant light before the walls of Jericho, I want to say.
Jericho's Old Testament.
Yeah, I could be getting my stories mixed up here. But I want to say Jesus was the one who appeared in armor made of light, carrying a massive sword, and he led the charge and shattered the walls. I could be getting that wrong.
That might be in Revelations, if it's anywhere.
No, that's Moisha.
Oh, that's
no. I forget.
Okay, so
I should have fact checked that before I started pulling it out of my ass.
Yeah, but if we have anybody who's got any sort of expertise on theology, if you can dig up some weird amalgamation of what Wolf is talking about, I would love to see a verse or something before we continue to assert that this is any kind of fact. Yeah, go grab Chris. He'd know.
Yeah, go grab Chris. He would know this story. I was told this story and I was fascinated by it because it went against everything that I was taught that Jesus was this.
It could be a Gnostic. It could also be a Gnostic text because Jesus does pull some trash in Gnosticism.
I was taught it in Southern Baptist Church. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he also went in, like, we could even just bring up something a little more easy that is more referenced, and that's that he got pissed off when people were taking advantage of believers and selling sacrifices in the temples, and he, like, overturned the tables and chased a bunch of people off with a whip because he was pissed off about them taking advantage of people in the temples. So, like, he was a violent human being when he was in a human body.
That was what, Mark? That was in what, Mark? I feel like that was in Mark.
I want to say it was in Luke, actually.
Oh, yeah, Luke. Yeah, that makes sense.
I love
Luke,
Christian memes. Christian memes where it says, "What would Jesus do?" And it says, "Flipping tables and chasing people with whips is not that far out of the question."
So Maya Atkinson, what is being looked up here is Wolf told a story about Jesus appearing cloaked, cloaked in armor and covered in swords before and knocking down, like leading an army to knock down the walls of somewhere. And
Holding a sword, he appeared before troops. Troops were about to go to battle, and Jesus appeared before them in an armor made of light, holding a sword, and he led the troops,
Light?
and they were victorious in that battle.
That makes me think some sort of Gnostic thing because an armor made of light.
yeah, but he was saying that he got taught this in like Baptist stuff. So it's
Actually, it was a guest speaker at my local church here in town. The Warrior Poet Society YouTube guy. He actually came and visited us, and he's actually a really nice guy. His channel's dedicated to guns, but he works scripture into his stuff that he does with weapons, and that's
it sounds
he's all
either
about
like Old Testament or Rev, honestly.
It does sound. It was Old Testament. It was not Revelations.
Either that, or it could just be a story, or it could just be a story that he's just made up.
I don't think it was made up. He pulled from scripture and he read from it from the Bible. Like he carries a Bible with him. I cannot remember what it is, but I'll actually get that Bible verse from him. I know I can
you
contact
mute your mic,
him.
please? I was asking you to mute your mic.
But the way he described that story was that it may have said angel in the passage, but that it is commonly understood that it was Jesus himself that came.
Okay, so that's interesting. Huh. I don't think I've actually heard that one. But then again, I wasn't Baptist. I was generic evangelical.
Oh man, I
was pagan.
Ever about the story.
Calon, you're special, okay? We all understand this. You're the only one here who doesn't have a deconversion story of some kind.
I'm pretty deep Baptist. My grandfather was a Southern Baptist preacher my entire life.
So, I guess coming back to, like, Christian arguments against polytheism, have you guys ever experienced one that did not specifically come back to the Bible is true because God said that it's his word? Or something along those lines. Because most of the other arguments we get from Christians have to do with how abhorrent our practices supposedly are, right? Like, you make offerings to your gods, you're bribing your gods. I've heard that a lot from Christians.
Oh, I love it when they bring up the Bible, because then I'm like, okay, so the Havamal is true because Odin says it's true.
I hate that argument. As someone who loves the Havamal and paid a very high price tag on a physical copy that was illustrated and has multiple translations,
Ooh, cool.
I do not like that argument.
Oh, I don't either. It's to demonstrate that I can just take the text and do the same, basically.
I mean, what's the purpose of prayer then? I mean, you could say that you are bribing your deity with words.
Well,
what is the purpose of prayer?
Rather than specific sacrifices?
Well,
what do you mean by what is the purpose of prayer?
Well, I mean, like, if you were talking
thing about criticizing people who say that sacrificing things for your god is bribing your deity.
Thomas, I'd prefer to use offering over sacrifice. Sacrifice generally means, like, IMO, it usually means blood is spilled, at least in, like, etymology when you're talking about, like...
Yeah, I thought you said something about sacrifice or offering.
I said offering. I don't see sacrifice and offering as being
okay. I must have heard that. Whatever.
I'm okay with the word sacrifice.
I tend to use the word offering just because sacrifice denotes blood, and I don't tend to do any sort of blood-based offerings.
But anyway, my argument still stands that I mean, you are offering words and prayer to your deity. You could consider that bribery, but
okay, well, what's the difference between, like, do we want to get a little deeper into etymology here? What's the difference between prayer and supplication, Thomas?
That's a good question.
Wolf, are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay, prayer can be praise or supplication. Supplication specifically is asking for something. So like a
that makes
hymn,
sense.
so like a hymn that is sung in a church praising God is prayer, but supplication is like when you get on your knees and you ask for help for something, or you ask to be given something, or for a blessing or something like that. So prayer can encompass both praise and supplication. It's a general catch-all for both, but supplication specifically is asking. So technically, at that point, is a hymn an offering? Is praise an offering?
I would say no.
Calon?
I would say no as well.
There are actually some segments of Hellenism that state that yes, technically, if you do not have a physical offering to give your gods, praise can actually, like a hymn performed or sung, can stand in for an offering. Some folks believe that on the Hellenist side.
I've heard that as a thing.
Oh, actually, no. Yeah, no. We have that precedent in heathenry in the sagas where, I forget who it was, but he makes a poem to Thor, and Thor sends him a whale, and that saves the village from hunger.
Well, yeah, and there's versions of that where in I believe it might have been Theseus, who, like, when he was gearing up to fight, like, sent a prayer off to, I want to say it was Athena, and said, "For all of the offerings I have given you, for all of the incense I have burned for you, for all of the throats that I have cut for you, I ask for this." Like, and there was an entire segment of praise first, and then he invoked all of the offerings that he'd already given, and then gave his supplication. Also, Carl de Hout, I'd like to adjust something from the chat. Ritual is different than offerings or sacrifices. A ritual doesn't have to contain an offering. The word ritual is a lot broader, I think. Would that be fair, guys? Because Wiccans use the term ritual to describe their magical practices and to describe structured rites around their magical practices, and offering doesn't factor into that religion.
I'm only ever going to be speaking from the Norse perspective. If I'm going to have a ritual, and if I'm going to partake in bloat, which is our Norse ritual that deals with having alcohol and a sacrifice, there's going to be an offering made. If you're going to gather people and you're going to pass a horn around, give hails, venerate whatever deity it is that you're venerating, there's going to be an offering made.
Well, and that's the same with Hellenism. Like, if I go downstairs to my temple room and I am, saying hymns, adding prayers, etc., I'm going to be making offerings, or at the very minimum, libations, which are themselves a form of offering, right? A libation is a poured liquid.
Yeah, that is an offering.
But
I tend to make libations myself.
The only contesting that I was having here was in all of polytheism. That isn't always the case, because again, the Wiccan tradition and certain other traditions do not include offerings as part of their ritual practice.
I would say that I do, because if I'm doing ritual, then it's, for me specifically, ritual is for holiday celebrations. It's the only time that I do anything that I would call a ritual. And I include a feast, and a full plate is left for the ancestors. Yes. And I consider that an offering because I'm giving up something of mine to them. If it's just something that I've got to do, like as a daily thing, I tend to call that a working, but I do tend to give what I would consider offerings there as well, usually in the form of incense or in the form of a candle, because I'm giving something up for, to them, to my ancestors, potentially deities in the future. So it's kind of a, one second.
Just to piggyback off of what she was saying.
Well, you get the same from Hecateos. You leave a plate for the ancestors for that.
Right.
or the Hakatian dinners. Go on, Wolf.
I was just going to say, an offering, I know you mentioned earlier the difference between offering and sacrifice. You can make sacrificial offerings without there being blood involved. Technically, you're not supposed to be able to have a bloat without there being blood involved, sacrificing of an animal. But in our practices that we've been doing for the last few years now, you can just offer something that you made, or it can be something that you've purchased because you are sacrificing your time at work or whatever it is you do to then earn money, and then you're turning around and using the money that you earned through the sacrifice of your time and sweat and all that to then buy something and then give it up to the deity, and that would be qualified.
We also have President. You can actually sacrifice an animal without killing it.
Yeah, that's
in the saga. That's in the saga of Travenkel, where
Guys,
a horse is sacrificed, but the horse isn't killed. Nobody, however, can ride the horse.
So, Calon, Thomas, before you answer really quick, Witch was trying to get in.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
For me, the difference between offering and sacrifice isn't in what I'm giving up. An offering, I'm giving something up specifically to honor the ancestors, and that is it. A sacrifice, I am giving them something in request for something from them.
Can you give an example?
If it's a holiday, it's going to be an offering. I am giving them a plate of food just to honor and acknowledge their existence, and that's it. I'm not going to make any types of requests for anything in my life at that time. A working is probably going to be a sacrifice in request for calming my house down or wisdom in a situation or something like that.
So you're talking about magic?
Yeah.
That's
sort of.
I mean, in a hermetic sense, yeah.
Well, I mean, Witch says that she is trying to reconstruct a magical tradition.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's interesting.
Well, I kind of wanted to come back a little bit. So I can grant Wolf your idea of, a sacrifice can be something that you've earned or purchased, etc. I'll grant that. To me, I think part of the reason why I distinguish those two is because for a while I was Wiccan, and I did see that, offering was sometimes referred to as anything that wasn't, an animal specifically, whereas sacrifice was always something that had once been able to bleed. I do not do, blood sacrifices basically at all in my own practice. I'm vegetarian and I'm highly allergic to meat. It can kill me. I have nearly died actually in the past month because somebody wasn't watching labels and I was given something that had meat in it and my, lips and tongue swelled up to the point where I couldn't even breathe. So...
Wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
Sorry that happened.
I can't be around blood. It's a particular protein found in meat that I'm allergic to.
I would just like to say that I'll have to go soon, so yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
So, coming back to offerings and sacrifices, the thing that I wanted to bring up was Christians often say that we bribe our gods. And I'd love to hear from each of our perspectives what you see offerings as. Because this is something, I get flustered when this is brought up, because that's not exactly what's going on here.
I see offerings as your basic...
Which you're not muted.
As basically offering the essence of a particular object to a deity, and sometimes in return, the deity will give, I guess, what term I would use for it is making.
Mm-hmm.
Wolf will know what I'm talking about, he also watches Artie Perger. Basically, his view is my view when it comes to that.
But I mean, could you explain what the relationship is there? You're
But
not
the
giving
relationship,
them,
yeah,
like you're not giving them with an expectation specifically, or are you?
No, not entirely. No, are at times it kind of depends on the circumstance, really. If I am with an expectation, what it's more of, it's for the gods to help give me the ability to do something. Like, I don't really ask for intercession, I guess you could say. But if I'm not, then no, I don't expect anything in return. It's just something I do for piety's sake.
Wolf, do you have a comment from Heathenry as well?
So, reword the question for me. I want to make sure I get this direct.
So the accusation is that pagans giving offerings to our gods is effectively bribery. That we are, trading offerings for blessings specifically. That we're trying to get a specific thing out of it.
Nah, I'm going to say absolutely not, because good luck trying to make a god do anything that you want them to do in that moment.
You want to get a god to laugh at you? Tell them you might know their will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, when you're making an offering, you're opening up you're opening what is called the gifting cycle. And I can get into this with people. People can be in gifting cycles with each other, but when you're doing it with a deity,
well, I mean, friendships are effectively gifting cycles.
Absolutely, but there's a little bit of magic / woo that goes into that, which would take a little bit of time to explain. Have you seen that meme from Workaholics, where the guy's got the red line strung all over the place and he looks crazy when he's trying to connect the dots?
Oh yeah, that meme. Yes.
Yep, that's basically what the gifting cycle is.
But guys, I'll have to leave now. It's been a pleasure.
Right,
absolutely, Thomas.
You
have a good night.
Good night, Thomas.
Good night.
But yeah, so you make an offering to a deity, not expecting a thing. If you are deliberately expecting a certain outcome, just go ahead and set yourself up for disappointment if you want to do that.
That said, you can request assistance. You just can't request a particular outcome from said assistance. Is that correct?
I mean, you can hope, but yeah, straight up expecting something, that's where you're messing up there.
Well, yeah, like for example, the other day I had a major panic attack about a decision that I had to make. And I went down into my ritual room and did an additional ritual giving additional offerings and asking Athena specifically to help me with that decision. I didn't ask her to help me make the decision one way or the other. I simply asked for assistance with making the decision itself and for the personal strength to follow through on whatever I decided. It wasn't necessarily bribing her to do so. I gave those gifts to her because I love her as a goddess, because I respect her, but it was, that's part of the honoring and respect. You
would have given the gifts anyway.
You
would have given the gifts anyway.
Correct. I would have given her those gifts regardless.
So.
Go on, Wolf. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're fine. But so yeah, when I'm making an offering, I'll give a really good example. I was hoping for my wife is expecting. My wife and I were pregnant, and we both were hoping for a boy. And right before we went to the baby doctor to get the ultrasound done, I took my Frigga statue out into the woods. I cooked her a very nice meal. I made it with my own hands, and I poured some mead into my offering cup that I've got for my statues, and I said an offering prayer to her, and I hoped that she would help bless us with a boy. And I left the meal out in the woods for the whites and her to enjoy. And I went to the baby doctor. And I found out we were having a boy about an hour later. Now, I'm not saying that's, proof of anything one way or the other, but it was really nice.
Yes. And in my case, immediately afterwards, funnily enough, Calon and I ended up having a conversation. She kind of volunteered just of her own volition to talk to me about this, and we ended up having an extended conversation about...
Oh, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, about the specific virtue ethical set that I ascribed to, and which of these virtues applied to this incredible difficult decision that had caused me the panic attack. And she basically said the things that I needed to hear the most and helped me work through it in a very calm way. I also had a sort of peace that descended on me after those prayers and offerings were given and when I closed the ritual. Like, where all the panic had been there before, it just disappeared. Which, again, that's a very subjective experience, but it wasn't something I expected. As I was doing the prayers and rituals and stuff, I did not expect my body to do that. It doesn't normally when I go into ritual and things, not always. But in this case, I had a total peace that sort of descended over me, and then Calon and I ended up having this conversation, and I got what I felt was all of the philosophical grounding I needed to then make that decision, which is, again, if Athena's going to interfere, that's basically what it would look like from the Goddess of Wisdom. Her whole thing is kind of like making sure you have the independent ability to reason your way through something. That's a good chunk of her shtick, according to the mythology. Again, not saying that it's proof, but it is an example of how this sort of thing works.
I was possessed.
I think I look at this a little differently because I'm used to working with the matrons of my ancestors rather than deity. And when I'm asking for, I don't ask them to intercede on my behalf, but I will ask them for like wisdom in a situation or something that helps me to take care of a situation myself. And there's an expectation of an exchange in that. And I think that kind of comes in with the fact that they were human at one point. And when you're interacting with other humans, there's an expectation of payment in some form. Not always monetary, but time or assistance around their house or something like that. So if I'm asking for something from them, then there's that expectation of payment in some form.
So, would you say that that's the same thing as a bribe, though, for those of us who do work with deity? Because that's not, again, I don't expect automatically the specific outcome that I'm asking for.
Right, no,
and
I don't.
Sometimes I make offerings without asking for anything at all.
I mean, I don't see it as a bribery or the expectation of the outcome that I want. Sorry, I came outside to get away from the noise of the kids. I don't see it as bribery or as I'm going to get what I'm asking for any more than I see taking my car to the mechanic and paying the mechanic to hopefully be able to fix whatever is wrong with my car.
You're bribing your mechanic, which you need to stop.
I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay.
Like,
there's no guarantee the mechanic's going to be able to fix my car any more than there's any guarantee that my ancestors are going to be able to guide me or whatever it is that I need.
So, I guess now would be the time probably to open it up to the floor. We've talked about your beliefs are delusion. We've talked about your devil worshippers. We've talked about your gods aren't real. We've talked about there's an objective reality. We've talked about your gods are idols. I still have yet to have found a Christian who can actually define idol for me, because like if you believe a god can reside in a statue, then like that god is still real, right? Like you can't say that it's not unless we're back to the devil worship argument. But anyway, and we've covered the idea that religious experiences have somehow officially been debunked by science. Are there any other arguments that you've dealt with from either atheofundies or Christian fundies, or even just fundamentalists? Christofundies. That you guys would like to talk about, like that you guys would like to help arm folks that might deal with it against, or or just vent your frustration with, that sort of thing. Or do we want to talk about the assumptions that some of these arguments are based on, or where would we like to go from here?
Well, I would like to give the atheists kind of a point in their favor on one thing. I don't stealth in real life because I'm afraid of atheists asking me questions. I do it because of living in an area where Christians follow a doctrine that literally tells them I should be killed. So I live in a very conservative area, so I just kind of want to give atheists props on that part. I don't stealth because of them.
Yeah,
and see, God's Christians are wrong there, because there is no doctrine that says that we should be killed.
Well, the closest is "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," which was a change made in the Bible.
Right.
Yeah.
But that doesn't translate to kill all witches.
In conservative
areas,
James version is the only version ever. They tend to take that point literally.
Right. You can interpret it that way, but it doesn't state that.
So, is there any other argument you guys would like to address from either Christofundies or atheofundies? Are there any arguments that the chat has heard that they would like us to talk about? We have to wait for the chat for a sec, so if anybody here has ideas for arguments they've heard that they'd like to work with, I'd love to hear something from you guys, because those are the ones that I've been hearing a lot, so I figured we could address those first.
One is that our gods were once heroes, and therefore we shouldn't worship them. That was one really dumb one I've heard.
What?
They'll say, oh, Odin was just a man. He was never a god. He was never intended to be a god.
But I mean, Odin has his roots in the Skyfather archetype, doesn't he? Same as Zeus?
No, that's Tyr.
Yeah, Tyr is most likely the Skyfather. There's debate on that back and forth, but most likely Tyr was actually the chief god for a long time, and then he fell, and Odin that
to Odin
mantle up.
But that they were historical figures, not meant to be worshipped, which it's like, well, you do realize ancestor worship is part of paganism, even if that were true. B, we have place names, like Odense, Denmark is literally Odin's Bay, which is the Bay of Odin, which means an open-air shrine to Odin. So, yeah. Take it up with the ancient Germans.
I said I think Wolf wanted to get in there.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just agreeing.
Okay.
I've got an ending statement that I wanted to give, and then I'm probably going to hop off here. But unless the chat has some questions for me that I can answer.
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up if nobody has any more ideas. I haven't seen any more questions coming from the chat, and it looks like we're down to 10 viewers at the moment, so we probably could start.
That's still pretty good for us.
Calon and I were actually speaking earlier today, and ended up writing out a pretty good amount of my thoughts on my beliefs and why I believe in them. And I was just going to kind of read what I wrote.
Sure,
Okay.
we could start
Sure.
closing statements, and we'll start with you then, Wolf, and then we'll all close out. And are you going to be coming to the Poly-Ology Discord to hang for a bit after stream, like we usually do?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's start closing statements then. Wolf volunteered to go first. Congrats.
So, for me personally, I don't think anyone will ever know the truth until they can come back after they've died and communicate with us, or until we just cease to exist and there is nothing. And then at that point, it doesn't matter who was right or wrong. But in the meantime, I'm content with my belief system as it leads me on this fulfilling path, and I bring no harm to those around me because of it. I don't owe anyone anything, and I'm not trying to convince you or anyone else that they do, that my gods do exist. Just that this is what I believe, and as my beliefs are not harming anyone, I find they are more than justified in holding. That's basically how I feel.
All right, Calon, do you want to do a closing statement?
Sure. Like Wolf, my beliefs don't harm anyone. I'm allowed to evolve in my own belief system. And so long as it's coherent and there is no evidence to the contrary, I should be allowed to maintain those beliefs without constantly having to justify myself to anyone, because I don't ultimately owe anyone anything.
I do want to add one more thing real quick. I meant to include this. When I said that I don't think anyone will ever know the truth, I hold my beliefs provisionally. Anybody can present me with evidence that the gods don't exist, and as long as it is sufficient evidence, I would have to stop believing in them. I would examine the evidence and make sure that it was logical evidence, but then I would stop believing in them. I'm not going to hold a truth claim over anybody else. But until that sufficient evidence has been provided to me that my gods don't exist, I feel sufficient in a logical position to continue worshiping them. And no matter if the gods do or don't exist, I'm going to continue ancestor veneration because I know for a fact my ancestors existed, and I believe honoring them is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Hey, Rilla, you ended up catching us right as we were wrapping up, so we're going to be heading to Discord soon if you want to meet us there. So, Witch, do you want to give a closing statement?
I'm just gonna echo pretty much kind of what Wolf said. I'm not harming anyone. I'm not trying to make anyone believe what I believe. I've got a lot to learn, so if you want to present me with evidence of something, I'll read it. If it convinces me, it convinces me. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm not harming anybody, so I just kind of want to live a peaceful life with everybody else.
And that's fair.
Yeah, that should be expected, is that you should just be able to live your life.
Well, and
Exactly.
I'm going to fire some flares into the crowd here for, atheo-fundies who might watch this, because I'm going to clarify. My statement is not to those of you who ask questions or who want to have a good faith discussion, who want to understand, who want to debate. This statement is for those of you who feel as though there is some part of you that is somehow invalidated by my continuing belief in my deities and the continuing belief that the others in this call share in theirs. And that is, if we are harming no one, continuing to practice our beliefs, if we are discussing another topic and you bring up epistemology, if we are in no way attempting to convert you or to legislate away your rights or to in any way affect your life, and your obsession becomes that you must disprove our beliefs to us, and you're going to continue to attack them and use inflammatory rhetoric and attempted gotchas and treat us as though we are fundamentalist Christians attempting to convert you. If we are harming no one and not attempting to affect your life, then the problem likely does not lay with us, but with you. And you might want to figure why you have your horse in this particular race. Because for those of us who practice our beliefs, in some measure of respect and love, if I'm not sitting here telling you that you must also make offerings to Zeus or you're going to get screwed over in the afterlife, then why do you care if I do? Fair?
I agree.
So,
Fair.
Yep, fair.
so those are, you know, again, I can understand why a Christian would do it, but with atheists, I don't get it. And if y'all want to tell me why in the comments, then I would absolutely love to hear it. But if your argument comes down to, well, your belief is irrational and it's going to lead to shittier
You're
rational
delusional.
beliefs, then again,
Report to the infirmary.
you're gonna have to report you're gonna have to report to the Fundamentalist Rehabilitation Center, and maybe get into a couple of debates with some other pagans who know their shit might straighten you out a bit. All right, so thank you everybody for joining us discussing fundamentalism on Poly-Ology. I hope that you guys got something out of this. I hope that for our pagan viewers, you got some more arguments to use next time somebody decides to go after you with one of these oh too tired arguments. For our atheist viewers who are curious what the answers to some of these questions are and have not gotten a chance to talk to one of us yourself about them, I hope that this helps give you sort of a bigger understanding of where, at the very least, the polytheists in this particular chat are coming from our various traditions, and also how not monolithic polytheism is, because even though Calon and Calon, mute your mic, please. Even though Calon and Wolf and I and Witch agreed on a lot of things.
My name is Calon, not Calon. Mute your mic.
Calon, mute your mic. Even though we may have agreed on a lot of things, and the ADHD is strong in this chat, and I can say this because Calon and I both have it, dang it.
What? I'm sorry, I was paying attention to something else. What were you saying?
We ultimately did disagree on a few things, including things like terminology, and Thomas and I were about to start a war over Platonism and Stoicism. So, gives you an idea.
I should have fanned
Polytheism's
that
not
play.
a monolith. It's not. And these arguments, hopefully, with you guys being a little more familiar, if you hear this stuff again, if nothing else, you can be like, here, go watch 2 hours of a bunch of different polytheists showing you why what you just said is crap. Alright? So, like basic end of the channel plug stuff, we're all about to go head over to the Poly-Ology Discord. I did actually update the video, so it should be in the description if you're not already there. Like the video if you haven't gotten a chance, and if you're not subscribed, please do so. We've got a whole bunch of fun stuff coming down the pipeline. We're resurrecting the Mythological Monday series.
Including a debate between Aliakai and Thomas.
Apparently that's a thing that's going to happen at some point, so I'm gonna have to get better at
That's going to be
Platonists.
coming next week.
Oh, okay, Calon, no, it's not coming next week. I need more time to prepare. But
Next week, Aliakai versus Thomas.
Calon is a liar, and you should not take her seriously.
Wow. I thought you were supposed to be nice to me.
I love you, Calon. So, if you
I
haven't
know,
gotten a
I'm
chance,
giving you a
subscribe,
hard
because we've
time.
got some fun stuff coming down the pipeline. Leave a comment in the comments section if you want to try to address one of our arguments, or rebut one of our points, or even just show your support. Twitters of all of the participants that I had Twitters for are in the description. If I don't have one yet from you, Witch or Wolf, if you guys could send them to me, I'll update the description later. And
Will do.
yeah, thanks for joining us on Poly-Ology. We'll see you next week, Thursday at 3 p.m. PST.